So we're looking at this decision making. Mainstream economics, in order to get published in the American Economic Review, you have to use mainstream equilibrium economics, which is imitative scientism. You do what the person did before you, and then you adjust it slightly. That's how you get published, and that's how you then become tenured professor, and then how you become the chair of the Federal Reserve Bank, or president of the Dallas branch of the Federal Reserve, or assistant secretary for fiscal policy and tax policy, or director of the OMB. So this is scientism, and the way that you can put all this stuff to mathematics is by making these assumptions that you have consumption and production functions which are known, knowable, and unchanging. So you have this assumption, past behavior is like future behavior with some kind of Bayesian distribution. So you use statistics, project past behavior, and then with some Bayesian distribution you can use econometrics and modeling to then model the economy and regulate the economy, again based on assumptions that you're making about industrial structure, like we've talked about in our continuum. So that's one way to look at the world, is this way, that the experts. But then you have another way, which is uncertainty, which is the unknown unknowns. The risk is the known unknowns, uncertainty is the unknown unknowns. And that's where Buchanan comes in with his idea of opportunity cost. Buchanan's opportunity cost, which is just celebrated its 50th anniversary. So people have been studying that and looking at that again. So besides this perfect competition ideal that mainstream regulatory economists use, you also have things which, asset specificity, which we've discussed already, which prevents perfect factor mobility, which prevents the world from acting like these mainstream models. You also have other distortions in perfect competition, which is called bounded rationality, which we talked about when we talked about the fee homeworks somewhat. You have sunk costs. So what happens in the past is unimportant from an economic sense. It's what you do forward that's important. It's important from an accounting sense and a business administration sense, what you've done in the past, because that's how you do your financial statements and raise capital and pay dividends and all that. But from an economic sense, what happens in the past is unimportant. And then you have framing. So people are not cognitively omniscient. They're affected by what they see. So framing, for example, if it's raining out, you're going to put umbrellas by the door so you can sell them quicker. Or bread's going stale, you'll put it in, so people frame that. Or if you're a power-grabbing statist, you'll make everybody wear a mask so you can frame the election the way you want it to come out, which is severe us versus them behavior. Status quo, people tend to do what they did yesterday. So I mentioned entrepreneurial awareness. Only some people are not risk averse. Some people seek risk, and because risk brings return. That's Finance 101, risk versus return. And then you have authority bias, which is especially here, because we created this British utilitarian society where we have experts with using imitative scientism and mathematics who know best. So we've had 80 years of the welfare state, 80 years of Keynesian economics, so we've all had this expert So what Buchanan, another critique of the mainstream models is that you don't know with certainty the outcome versus perfect competition model. You don't know with certainty the outcome, not least because people are capricious. They don't know what they want really until they're in the act of choice. And these types of models can't explain increasing returns to scale. And as we learned when we studied economic size of the state, economic growth in historical context, economic growth increased 1,000% in the 20th century. So these models can't explain increasing returns to scale or the creative destruction of new value creation. So Buchanan then introduces opportunity cost to get around this type of false model, false scientism. And especially when you're within a firm, there's a lot of non-market price decisions going on. When we get to political economy of the firm, we'll see why there's an incentive for firms to grow too large. So this is Buchanan quoting Shackle. When a number of actions distinguished from each other by the set of outcomes respectively assigned to them are available, in other words, whoever has the right to place assets further on, including in the firm as well as individuals, and choice amongst them is open to the decision maker, the set of outcomes, each considered as a whole, are mutually exclusive rivals of each other. Within each set, the members are also mutually exclusive hypotheses. Thus, these outcomes cannot be matters of fact, but are things imagined by the decision maker. They exist in his, or they exist in their imagination, not after, but before his commitment to a particular act. In other words, a critique of this known and knowable set of blueprints. They exist in his imagination, not after, but before his commitment to a particular act. Their existence is within the moment of decision and forms part of that act. And that's both in production and consumption. Okay, so we're looking at, again, the difference between opportunity cost, which is subjective and only known in the moment, versus the mainstream regulatory model or expert model, which consumption and production functions are known, knowable. Joan Robinson called them a set of blueprints. So these are two different views of the world. So here, Pizza in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, where I live, perfect competition, emerged optimal quantity, optimal price, maximum consumer surplus, producer surplus. This is in a partial equilibrium model. Then, if you, let's say, go out to pizza in the USA, well, then it gets harder to measure, and then these assumptions become less and less robust. So, Buchanan's point and Hayek's point is that these models are useful when they're abstracted from. You can't use statistics and econometrics to say this occurred in the past, therefore this will then occur in the future, because that's too specific, and each specific case is unique. But you do get a pattern of outcomes. Demand tends to shift downward, supply tends to shift out, slope upward. And we're going to look at these consumption, when we get to the production functions of the firm, these are called the Marshallian cost curves. So we'll be getting to later in the semester the Marshallian cost curves, which shows the supply. So for Buchanan and Hayek and Shackle, it's a pattern of outcomes. Right? So if Mayor Bloom Bloomberg's going to raise taxes with the tax wedge. His advisors are going to tell you we can raise exactly $10 million if you double the cigarette tax. That's not true because it doesn't account for the general equilibrium smuggling. So an example I wanted to give on minimum wage in robotics, you know that if you put factors of production, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurial talent, you know that if you're going to put on a minimum wage on labor, that the supply in the short term will shift back because now one of the factors of production is more costly. Or require health insurance for if you have over 10 people, or all these distortions that Bastiat says create non-harmonious situations, prioritizing some over others. So you know that if you put on a minimum wage that my pizza is going to cost more, but you don't know exactly how much more. But then you also know that entrepreneurs are intelligent, so what they're going to do is they're going to substitute into robotics. And we know from Adam Smith that all investment is labor-saving investment. Robotics, the end result of that. So you know that in the short term, if you make one factor of production more expensive, in this case labor, you'll substitute out labor into capital or robotics. So then you get supply shifting out again. But the third shift, but you don't know where it's going to end up because it's a pattern and it's uncertainty. Okay, any questions on that?